Wow. Hello. Ooh, nice background there. Fancy. Oh, yeah, feedback. Nice. Cool. Oh, Lorna's here. Hey, Lorna. Katrina feeding back.
All right. Hello and welcome. Jumping right into it. This is Death Stranding. This is it. This is the big one. Welcome to Art and Video Games. I'm Mitchell Chan. With me is Matt Shell. Travis is away this week, and Billy is going to be jumping on in a little bit once we have finally made it through all of the opening cutscenes of today's mega blockbuster of an art game. Hideo Kojima's masterpiece, Death Stranding. And we're pretty excited to do this, right? This is a piece. Feels like we end up like sort of touching on this on this game, like every episode we do. It's one that our small but dedicated viewership has like messaged us about over and over again, about the game that we got to do. I love like you and I have had very different experiences playing this, and so I'm excited to jump into it. How are you feeling, Matto? It says we're having some issues that we can't hear you. Um, Hold on. Oh wait, maybe I've fixed that. Can you talk again?
Talk, talk, talk. 111, 222. I am talking.
I think we got it now.
I'm
Sorry,
talking.
once again I turned down the. Okay, so apparently this is now a Mitch ASMR feed where people are just listening to the sound of me drinking coffee. You like
Oh,
that? You like
it's the
that? Yeah.
audio from me.
This is it.
It's the audio
No.
from the. Oh,
Um.
no, it's just your mic while I was talking.
I think that we are good
Okay,
now.
good. Yeah. Is
I
we good?
always in OBS I forget what all these audio feeds are. Um and yeah, and I end up turning down you guys, and then which plays into of course my master plan of this. Just what this whole feed is actually it's just silent reaction clips to Mitch monologuing. That's what we're really doing here.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Um,
Well, this is also a kind of a WWF cage match to determine is this really an art game. So Mitch is already fighting dirty by turning off my audio. So
Exactly. I silence the opposition. But look, here we are. So
yeah,
what we're looking at right now, this is how I did it for this week, because Death Stranding only allows you to have one save game file per 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 PlayStation account, right? So I fired this game up. I had originally played this game shortly after it came out in 2020, and I think we should talk about that very specific time, that specific moment in history a little bit later. But I lost my save game file from 2020. So I start up a new one, and this is it. This is the beginning of the game. I recorded the first like hour and a half of my playthrough so we could see the beginning of the experience, which is this lot of cutscenes, a lot of table setting, and then later we'll jump into playing live. But I thought it was really important to see like this is actually the first, these are the first moments of Death Stranding when you jump into it. I think that's important. And then,
Agreed. Agreed.
Matt, what I want to ask you is sort of, especially for like our, more art audience, like video game people will know about Hideo Kojima for sure. But to put you on the spot a
Yes.
little bit, can you give us a little bit of a background on who Hideo Kojima is, what his career has been, and how he gets to the point where he gets to make like a $100 million project like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I probably have some gaps in my knowledge of his like early history, but basically Kojima worked is a Japanese video game developer who worked for many years for Konami, which is one of the less major nowadays. Now they're doing more like kind of slot machines and pachinko games, but early on made a lot of very classic um, games for the Nintendo Entertainment System, the first Nintendo, like Contra and Metal Gear Solid, which was on the NES as well. In my mind, Kojima started to really become visible in his sort of a tourist mode with Metal Gear Solid for the PlayStation 1, which was like early 3D game, pioneered the stealth game genre,
Mm-hmm.
right? Prior to that, I think stealth games were not something that people really thought and talked about. And is probably kind of like interesting in thinking about his oeuvre in the sense of starting to subvert some of the classic video game kill everything type tropes and kind of prompting people to play in different ways, and also starting to develop this kind of sense of storytelling, which I think is a good just overall theme for us to talk about. But Metal Gear Solid is like famous for having a really unhinged plot line and storyline that's told primarily through cutscenes that in that case were just audio with or a mix of audio and text with like little character portraits, and obviously some animated cutscenes as well. Um, and then there were a bunch of Metal Gear Solid sequels. The Metal Gear Solid sequel, which I think is the Phantom Pain on PlayStation 4, was also pretty important. And we started to see some of the kind of shambolic, shaggy game design with a lot of like absurd features, like being able to attach enemies to balloons and send them into the air, and being able to put whatever music you wanted on a helicopter. And there's a really, really good article which we can put in the show notes that was kind of responding to Death Stranding, but by Tanya Short, who's a game developer that I have a lot of respect for, who wrote about it as kind of shaggy game design, almost kind of like maximalist game design,
Mm-hmm.
with all of these kind of strange and maybe a little bit disparate features. A lot of the time in the kind of aesthetics of game design, we talk about elegance and kind of purity, and like there's this desire to make this super refined, super focused little kind of Rubik's cube of a design where everything is sort of tightly interlocking. And I think Kojima in recent years has kind of torpedoed that. And I think Death Stranding is probably like one of the, I think Phantom Pain was a big step in that direction. And now
Mm-hmm.
Death Stranding is like a important kind of statement in that genre. And that's something that I'm personally a big fan of, this kind of mechanical maximalism and maybe a move away from elegance. Um, and then obviously, yeah, Death Stranding on, so the important, and I don't know the exact all the drama of this, but basically Kojima was kind of, in the eyes of a lot of gamers, was betrayed by Konami They wouldn't let him. I can't remember. They wouldn't let him make the next. I don't remember the exact details, but there was a break with Konami
Mhm.
where, and a lot of gamers really felt like they did him dirty after he did so much important work with them as a publisher, and then he left and started Kojima Productions, which is independent,
Mhm.
and raised money, put in his own money, and took a huge risk in doing that. In particular, there's not that many people starting companies and going into making big games like Death Stranding under those kind of conditions. So it was a bold and risky move, even for somebody with this kind of high level of respect as a kind of auteur in the video game scene, um, and then made Death Stranding, which is this tremendously ambitious and strange project, especially considering that he got the backing of Sony, had like a major marketing campaign behind it, and that it was so visible and also so kind of idiosyncratic feeling. It's as if somebody gave the budget for a Marvel movie to you know Harmony Korine or something. I mean, not that extreme, but it's like a very interesting situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's worth noting, like that arc that you described, particularly the end of it, where Kojima leaves Konami and starts his own studio. I mean, I mean, Kojima is one of the only game developers in history, right? Who could have done something like this, right? Like who could have raised enough money to start his own studio and do whatever the heck he wanted with it. So this is actually pretty exciting. Yeah, very very well summarized on the Kojima career arc. Thank you. And I would just
Thank
add
you.
to that, like a brief summary of this is sort of my very spotty history of experiencing Kojima games. As you mentioned, right, he starts off his first game, right, was Metal Gear for the NES, right? So I mean, this is back, and I remember being a kid and renting Metal Gear for the Nintendo, and I specifically remember it being one of my like shortest plays ever because it was so different. And I never figured it out as a kid. I never figured out this game as a kid. All right. I bring this Nintendo cartridge home from the video rental store. I pop it in. There's like an army guy on the front with a truck, and I see that, okay, I load up the game. There are bad guys. I think you have like 3 bullets in your gun only. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna shoot the bad guy. All right, but like and then I just get busted and the game is over, right? And there was like it was impossible for a kid like me to understand that no, you're actually not supposed to shoot the bad guys. You have to get around them without shooting them is bad. Never figured it out as a kid. Just never figured it out as a kid. So that was pretty radical. Oh my, this
Yeah.
is this is so fantastic. We're Matt, we are totally getting age shamed here as our commenters are saying, what is renting? You used to be able to go to Blockbuster and take a video game cartridge home for like a weekend, and then you would bring it back at the end of the weekend, and you would pay $4 or $6 for the privilege, and that was how most of us kids who were alive in the '80s and '90s experienced video games. I think it's safe to say. Um,
Yeah, I
fast,
mean, and importantly, because games were, 50, $60 back then, they've kind of
yeah.
stayed the same price for 30 years, but $60 back then to get a new game as a child was basically like you might get a new game every 6 months if you were lucky.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like forget about it. You're getting one game at Christmas, and if you're lucky, like a game, if
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
lucky, a game on your birthday. But a game was kind of too big of an ask for a birthday present in my house.
Yeah.
Mm. Um, yeah, the best I could do was work the divorced parent dynamic to maybe get 2 games at Christmas. That was how you could do it. Um, so. Um, Yeah, and just I say all that just to emphasize your point about subverting gameplay expectations from the very
Yes.
beginning, right? And I do remember that there already were some like kind of beautiful like 8-bit, cutscenes in that game as well. Fast forward many years because I wasn't a PlayStation kid. I was a Nintendo 64 kid. So I missed out on the Metal Gear Solid phenomenon, and I just knew they were critically
Yeah.
acclaimed. When I finally got a PlayStation 3 as an adult, right, the first game that I got when I got a PlayStation 3 was Metal Gear Solid 4, because I'd been
Yeah.
hearing all about the Metal Gear arc, and I wanted to jump into it. And it was just completely inscrutable to me. Like, it was undecipherable as much as, like, while the gameplay dynamics like remained still like, they were stealth based. They weren't like a normal like first person action adventure game. But now all of a sudden there was this plot and these cutscenes, these hours and hours and hours of cutscenes, right? And the Metal Gear Solid mythos, right, had expanded so much. I had no idea what was going on. There's Solid
Yeah.
Snake and there's Liquid Snake, and I don't know who's a
Yeah.
good guy and who's a bad guy. Like, it got very Byzantine. And to hear you talk about, the sort of shaggy maximalist gameplay design, that tracks, right? Just expanding out
Yeah.
in every direction, as were the mechanics. So too was the plot. And so this is really exciting because, I mean, we all know a little bit about sort of how the sausage is made culturally. You wonder how much of this crazy maximalism would have ended up on the cutting room floor whenever you're working for a publisher, right? Like
Yeah.
Konami. And now like here it is. This is Nobody is going to tell Kojima no when he gets to make his own video game for his own studio. So
Yeah. Exactly.
So that
No,
kind of
continue.
brings us up to where we are present day. And this is Death Stranding. And this is the first, whatever, 20 minutes of it. We see that at the very beginning we got a little bit of gameplay. We're getting a lot of cinematics to establish this story that is unfolding. It looks like we are this character very clearly portrayed by The Walking Dead's Norman Reedus. And we are in this post apocalyptic world where there is this rain that makes time go forward if it falls on you, which was represented by like the raindrop falls on his hand and it gets wrinkly and aged. Now here's this other mysterious character coming up. She is also apparently a package delivery person, which is a very important function in this new post-apocalyptic world because, as the environmental conditions are so harsh, most people live in underground bunkers, completely isolated from other people. They depend on a crude sort of internet, which we're going to discover is not yet fully set up. And that's going to be our main goal in this game, is to set people up with a sort of 3D internet so they can all be connected, and share resources together. But for now, in this isolated post apocalyptic world, the role of delivering stuff, materials, goods, medicines from point A to point B is an important job. And you, Sam Porter Bridges, are the only character who can do it. And is that a pretty good introduction to
I
Death
think it's a
Stranding and
great
what we're doing?
introduction. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a great introduction. Yeah, and I think that the really important thing that we can kind of see just starting to happen on the screen here, which I think is one of the most kind of like bold and interesting mechanical choices of the game, is the focus on walking. In most games, walking is this incredibly trivial push the directional pad. You see here he's kind of stumbling. Um, and so hopefully we'll get to see Mitch wipe out a little bit in his gameplay here, this pre-recorded gameplay. But so this idea of taking something here crossing a river is kind of risky and dangerous. You can see he's kind of staggering a little bit, and you can get knocked down in the river, and then you lose all your packages. Right now, he's just carrying like a very simple 2 boxes on his back, but you end up with these kind of like towers of boxes that you're carrying and make it even harder to walk. Um, and this idea of taking something that is so taken for granted, so kind of unconsidered as a mechanic, but that is basically core to almost any, I mean, to any character-based game, and turning it into something that is difficult and requires kind of patience and consideration, I think is like a truly bold and very, very interesting um, gesture from Kojima.
And it's funny because a lot of the time when we think about art games, a lot of the art games we're talking about, whether it's like like Walden, right? That like Thoreau game, or What Remains of Edith Finch. We talk about them as
Yeah,
walking simulators, where really all you do is you walk around and you collect, journal entries or audio logs or whatever, right? Walking simulator is the default genre, I think, of artists and auteurs trying to say something profound making games. And this is really leaning into that as a walking simulator. And as I was playing this, it was I am really glad I started up a new game of this. I couldn't
yeah,
help but think about QWOP or QWOP, which
yeah,
is like
yeah,
the absurdly like the absurdly minute focused walking simulator. And this is not quite that detailed. Like it's not quite that absurd. Um,
yeah.
and I gotta say,
Yeah, I
like
mean,
it's
Quap is like by Bennett Foddy, who actually I hope that we can cover some more, like we can cover Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy on the show. That's on my list. But Quap is a kind of masocore, ragecore, uh, intentionally frustrating experience, which I would not say that Death Stranding is. Right? They're introducing difficulty into walking, but it's not designed to make you feel the controller necessarily.
I think that there we go. There's
Oh, there we go.
I
There we go.
wiped
We got a
out.
fall.
Wiping out like
Nice.
that damages my cargo in the back. It is. I don't know. I'm not. I think there is a way that it's supposed to be frustrating, or
Mm.
boring, or like challenging on a level that is not like hand-eye coordination challenging the way most video games are trying to be challenging. This is
Yeah.
so early on in this game. I am right. I'm playing this game, and it's where a lot of the mechanics and what is going to be a really grueling. This is going to be a really grueling game in terms of getting through it, and I'm not seeing that yet because I'm pretty overwhelmed by how beautiful this game is. Right, it helps that this landscape is absolutely gorgeous to walk through. You kind of crest that first hill, and you get this
Absolutely.
soundtrack. Don't
Yeah.
don't be so serious, croons the soundtrack. Advice
Yeah.
Kojima himself will soon disregard. Um, and um, uh, but it is like you're right when you say that he's expanding out and thinking about the walking mechanic, but we got to say like it's not in the service of making it fun. Like there's no
Yes.
I don't the walking mechanic is not fun at all. And I think if you wanted to critique it, you could say that it's in this middle ground of you mostly press forward, but sometimes if you're falling down, you press L or R. like,
Right. You have to grip that. Yeah. And so people understand you're walking and then your character starts to stagger and you have to stop and
yeah.
grip the trigger buttons to stabilize yourself. So it is or there you see the packages start to sway and start to get out of balance. And then yeah, here he's overburdened a little bit. And I think this is an interesting. I mean, obviously, discussions of fun in games and should games be fun and do games need to be fun and all that stuff is like a long-standing debate in kind of artsy video game circles. I think that what Kojima, the way I interpret this, the kind of melancholic landscape and the feeling of struggle is for me um, really core to the aesthetic expression of the game. And whether this is an art statement or not, we can WWF over. But I think that that feeling, that very clearly communicated feeling of being disempowered, struggling, uh, feeling alone and having a long way to go and having to carry these things and constantly stop or fall down, and then also of being hunted, right, as will
Hmm.
come out in the game more. You know, later on, you do get some weapons and some ways to kind of fight back against the antagonists, and you get ways that the movement in the game becomes more and more trivial, right? You're not just walking throughout the whole game. Eventually, you get back to motorcycle that you saw in the intro and so on. But for me, the most memorable part of the game was actually, yeah, this early stage and the kind of journey after the ones we're watching now, where you're really just walking and kind of lonely and scared and struggling, but also it's kind of beautiful and sublime at the same time.
Absolutely. And it looks like we got Billy here. It looks like Billy's in. Billy, you want to pop in and say hi? All right, Billy will come in when he's ready. And cause I'm curious. Actually, I don't know if he's played this game. Back to your point, Matt. Uh, it's an excellent point, and it is so. So we agree on the fact that the core gameplay mechanic, and it's funny because you talked a lot about Kojima's mechanics getting more and more maximalist, right, over the course of the Metal Gear Solid games. Um, and in this game, tell me if you agree. Like that is not the case. It sticks. There are actually very few mechanics in this game.
That's an interesting point. I wonder how I there are for me, I think if you wanted to kind of like graph out the mechanics, the thing that's interesting about them is the way that they are not like, let's take a traditional kind of like video game progression system. It's like,
Mhm.
let's say you get a sword and then you get a sword that does more damage, and then you get a sword that maybe does more damage and regenerates your health, right? But these are all tightly linked and looping mechanics, right? That are all interacting with each other and are
Mhm.
all part of this core verb of killing, right?
Right.
In this game, we start out with walking and carrying, or it's like first we start out with walking, then we get carrying and inventory management,
Hmm.
right? What am I carrying and how am I? Well, first, so kind of what am I carrying? Kind of very traditional Skyrim-esque RPG inventory management layer. How am I carrying it? Which actually I think there's an interesting is a kind of a vestigial mechanic, right? Because they give you
Hmm.
the auto shuffle your boxes.
Yeah.
It like auto distributes your boxes around your body, which whereas I think actually probably Kojima initially thought that people would be carefully positioning boxes on their body, and that would be an interesting mechanic. And I think it was probably too tedious, and so they just
Hmm.
give you a button that just
Yeah.
says spread these around my body in a way
Right.
that's balanced,
Hmm.
which I think was a great decision actually. But it's an interesting kind of like smeared out part of the picture.
Right.
Um, but I think what's interesting is the way that a lot of these things don't exactly connect. I mean, they are connected, but they are also, or like the when we get later into the game with building the structures, building bridges, placing signs, and communicating with other players. Right, this massively single player world that he's created. It contributes to the feeling of loneliness and disconnection, but not they're not. For example, the whole likes system in the game is a
Hmm.
kind of a dead end, right? It doesn't connect to anything. It doesn't
Yeah.
do anything.
So okay, so it's a great point. So and now I'm starting to figure out the different categories on which we're going to have to assess this thing because I think they're all
Yeah.
successful to different degrees and they'll have very different strategies, right? There's the core mechanic level, right? The core single player mechanic level is one layer of the game. The multiplayer mechanic of the game is another layer that I think maybe we'll get to in the second half whenever we fast forward the game a little bit to the point where that actually
Yeah.
exists. And then there's the narrative and cinematic layer, right?
Yes.
And just to continue what you were saying about that core single player game mechanic layer. So like we agree that it's not really a fun game mechanic. Like it is not fun to be walking across this terrain, all right, having to just like literally watch every step that you're taking, and
Yeah.
watch how your character is teetering back and forth, right? Because of the amount of weight that they have. There's a little bit of strategy, as you say, determining how you're going to like how you're going to position that weight on your body. You can skip a little bit of it. Maybe there's some benefit to doing it yourself, but like you're absolutely right that it's a profoundly good art game mechanic because it does that thing that I'm on record as saying art games should do, which is to use the mechanic of the game to communicate your thesis, to communicate your idea, as opposed to as opposed to the narrative layer. And it is,
Thematic layer.
yes,
Yeah.
it's a game about it's a game about struggle. It is a game about overcoming struggle by really just concentrating on putting one foot in front of the other ad
Yes.
infinitum. And it
Yes.
doesn't give you a shortcut. It makes you actually do that. And it is boring and it is
Yes. Well,
tedious.
it's an endurance. It's about
Yes.
endurance, right? Which it really communicates. It's these kind of sheer landscapes, right? The which I love deeply. I mean, just the landscape, I think. And somebody in the comment was chatting. It's supposed to be America, which is kind of amazing, right?
Yeah.
This absolutely bizarre fantasy of America, any America that looks like this, right?
Has
Like,
Kojima
you
ever
know,
been to America?
I mean,
Like this is
I love this dimension of this, that this is supposed to be like the East Coast, like this just beautiful fantasy of it's like America as Iceland or whatever, like as you said in the chat, but there's something so kind of like Borgesian about that to me. But like the that feeling, this kind of desolation, and then this feeling of kind of endurance through it, to me is really the heart of it, which I think gets, this is one of the things where if we want to start to critique, I think like the later half of the game where it opens up and becomes more traditionally open world, and you actually start getting more power, right? I think undermines that actually, and is a little bit of the failure of having to make things into a kind of a long form commercial video game, where I feel like it actually would have probably been a better game if it had only been those first 10 hours and we hadn't necessarily gotten into all the zip lining and other, which I mean I also like, but as a kind of artistic statement, I feel like it increasingly loses focus in that way as it goes on. At least for the part that I found really beautiful.
Well, let's put a pin in that until we advance a little bit further in the game.
For
We
sure,
can
for sure.
talk
Yeah,
about, because I respect what you're saying about what we lose through that gesture, like how we lose that focus on the struggle and the concentration and the meditative aspects. But once
yeah,
we're able to actually engage with it, we can talk a little bit about what we gain, because that open worldness also ends up being completely dependent on like the network connectivity of the actual video
yeah,
game, right? And then
yes,
the network connectivity as represented in the narrative. Oh boy, like
yeah.
heck of a game. Okay, Matt, tell me if you agree with this statement, right? Talking about the grueling nature of the gameplay. Do you think that when making an art game that is going to fully leverage what games are good at, which is now Billy, I want to hear what you think about this too. Um, do you think it's true that
Yo,
to make an art game, and you know, I think for me, one of the things that I want an art game to do is communicate through its interaction mechanism and not just its narrative, right? I believe that an art game is not just about a way to take a narrative story and put it in different corners of a map, right? Like,
Yeah,
which is often kind of the default approach, particularly in most walking simulators. Um, do
definitely.
you have to sacrifice something about the stickiness or adrenaline rush of the gameplay mechanic itself in order to hone in and make that gameplay mechanic have symbolic value? I'm sure I
You
phrased that
know,
question really clumsily, but I think you guys know what I'm saying.
well, so yeah, I think it's a good and interesting question. I think that we are probably in a phase of exploring games as like an artistically expressive medium where that is a more common tactic just as a way to make a break with the kind of canonical body of games, right? Games historically, mainstream games or whatever we want to call them, traditional video games, have put so much emphasis on constant visual, mechanical stimulation, coin sounds ringing off, explosions, the power curving the player, so they're kind of getting this feeling of omnipotence and this kind of power fantasy, right? So the video games have been in this kind of just feeding you cookies and candy mode so heavily, with a lot of that being to do with the fact that they kind of came out of being toys designed for children, and now in order to make something, I think there's a self consciousness around differentiating away from that, that Kojima is very, very guilty of trying to appear serious, making everything gray and green, serious metaphysical themes, and this combined with this kind of like eat your vegetables endurance style gameplay. I think we're probably, especially in this case, we're in a kind of a pendulum swing away from the kind of cookies and candy, dopamine, serotonin rush of, um, what kind of video games have historically meant. I don't think that those things are inherently in opposition. I don't think that that's like that making something that expresses a thoughtful idea through the mechanics necessarily means you need to make it slow and boring to
Right.
put it in like a kind of simplified form.
Mhm.
I like to think about it and I mean, this may fail for other reasons, but in the like movie comparison, like a movie can have unbelievable special effects and just the most like vapid storyline of all time. It could have both vapid storyline and no special effects. It could have special effects and a great storyline. It could operate on neither of those planes and still be delivering something which makes you look at it as an artwork rather than, purely entertainment. I feel like that's just part of the landscape that, the creator is able to choose to utilize or not utilize, or make a statement by utilizing or make a statement by not utilizing.
Yeah, I think that's a really clean way of saying what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. I'm thinking about it because and I think it's not necessarily about boringness, right? As a marker of seriousness, therefore as a
Yeah,
marker of art. Although Matt, as you pointed out, that is often the case, right? Like often boringness is a strategy, right? To be a signal of intent. But no, but I do think that simplicity and stripping things down is an important part of legibility. And I think that, when you're making an artwork, I think your goal is to make something legible. And it's this whole thing of like, so to use an example that's in media art, but like but outside of it, maybe something like Christian Marclay's The Clock, right? Which is just this, which super focused on one very particular kind of like edit, one very particular kind of imagery, and it's awesome. But it's also like it's a 24-hour long film, and it maybe like wouldn't read as something that could be really popular or exciting for 24 hours. And people ask all the time about an artwork. Well, yeah, but why can't you do that? And also, put a superhero
and
in
some
it or something like that so
explosions.
people would
Yeah,
watch it, right? And the answer is like, well, because then you would lose the legibility. of it, right?
I, I think some artworks are purposely illegible though. Like I know that this is a
Yeah.
cop-out strategy for a lot of artists. You know, it's like, I don't know what my artwork means. Like, what does it mean to you? I've created enough like of a rich environment for you to find something worthwhile. But as a counterpoint to the clock makes me think of like Ryan Trey Carton. You know, you could see it as pure formal noise. You know, it's just so chaotic that it's almost like a formal exercise. But if you ever sat down and tried to watch an hour and a half video of Ryan Trey Carton, it's also narrative. Like there is actually an engaging story. Like it is cinematic in this way that's totally unexpected. And you realize that it's not just noise if you like maybe just stare hard enough or give it like a long enough thing that it has a storyline. It actually operates on like a pretty good entertainment scale. And the fact that it, you know, is able to do both at the same time is I think why it's sort of celebrated as such great artwork. But I think it's possible. You know, I feel like this is a recurring question on this Twitch. Is like, is it possible to make a good game that's also a good artwork that doesn't sacrifice being one or the other? I just think it's really hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah.
I think I'm with you there. And I think like this, I think Mitch, to your point about minimalism, and one of the kind of definitional ideas we had around art in a previous episode was that it was kind of creating a space for contemplation, right? And or maybe requesting or demanding some type of contemplative response, right? And I think that is more clearly communicated when you're in a kind of a minimalist environment and when you're kind of stripping back and you're taking away the cookies and candy and the entertainment elements and you're kind of that minimalism can make that easier, I think. So yeah, I'm kind of with Billy in the sense of that it's a difficulty access, but it's not. But these things are not necessarily like definitionally exclusive.
I think that's really fair. Billy, have you played this game, by the way?
So my story of this game is that Everett Williams,
Right.
co-founder of Folia, my man, who's sick right now, was going to maybe join. He and I played it together during the very beginning of COVID.
Okay.
And it was back when we used to live together. So projected on a wall, not leaving the house for many long times. Sometimes substances were involved, but mostly Everett playing because he's an expert video game player, and I'm a pro video game appreciator. And so I wasn't there for every stage of the game, let's put it that
Right.
way. But I was there for lots of it. And some of my favorite moments were sort of like coming in a little bit out of context and then being like,
Mhm.
is that Conan O'Brien? What the fuck is going on? Like,
All right. I
Conan
forgot
O'Brien is
so
in
Conan
the
times
O'Brien
game.
was in the game.
I couldn't believe that this game was real, that it was like
Right.
high production, there was big money put behind this. It's impossible that this game exists at this level in this distribution format. Like
Yeah.
I might be on drugs, but I think that this is like something that's actually real in front of me. I just can't understand how it's possible. And that's what I take away from the game most is I just can't believe this game got made in the way that it got made. It's still
Okay.
amazing to me.
Absolutely, and we touched on that a little bit. That real like Kojima is the only way that this game gets made on any level. Like not just like, oh, this could only come from his imagination. It is just all of the logistics and finances that go into making a game like this. It could only be Kojima. But that is actually an excellent segue, all right, for the next layer of this game that we need to talk about. So we just talked about the gameplay mechanics and acknowledging that there are different gameplay mechanics of of networked play that we'll get to later, all right, and level progression and crafting. But the core gameplay mechanic is walking, is pushing forward, and sometimes L and R. All right, but you need to be thoughtful on on every scale. You need to be thoughtful about your general route. You need to be thoughtful about every step that you take. And I think we can all agree that's a pretty minimalist mechanic, right? Like it's not like playing like Call of Duty where I got to think about my health bar, my stamina bar, like my reload, right? And so it's a pretty minimalist game mechanic at its core. And I think I would say that partially for the sake of debate, it's kind of a lame game, right? At the core. But now I want to talk about, and you guys can disagree with that, and it's totally cool. But just as a video game, um, The now we got to talk about this layer. While the core gameplay mechanic is super minimalist, we have been experiencing this most maximalist of cinematic and narrative layers. All right, you may have just seen as Billy was talking, we finally saw the title screen for Death Stranding. 45 minutes into it. All right, we have seen all of these high production value cinematic cutscenes. All right, as Billy alluded to, here are some things that are in this minimalist walking simulator. Conan O'Brien, Monster Energy drink, advertisements for a motorcycle show starring Norman Reedus. Like, this is for those people who have been following along watching the plot. Here's what's going on right now. Norman Reedus has inherited a fetus that he can connect via technology to his suit that is the product of a dying mother. He got here because he had to drag a corpse away from this city because corpses, when they die, they explode and leave craters. Soon we're going to figure out that in addition to all this environmental stuff, the president is dying. And guess what? The president is your mom. But she maybe was a hologram the whole time. You're given this information by the president's secretary, whose name is Die Hard Man. He wears a skull for a mask. He's not to be confused with the doctor, whose name is Dead Man. Like, this is the most.
Played by Guillermo del Toro, I might add.
I was just gonna
Huh?
say Guillermo del Toro is a shout out.
Yeah, right. Yes, he's in the game. Was that? That is a very inadequate summary of all the things that are going on in this game. But would you say that that's a good cross section of some of the things that are going on in the game?
It's definitely a nice sampling. Yeah, no, I mean it's funny because when we were talking, I think this was on the show. We were talking about this previously, and I think you were kind of. I was saying, "Oh, this is the best art game ever," and you were saying, "Yeah, but the narrative is kind of like absurd and terrible." And I'm just like, "Oh, I don't even watch the narrative. I'm totally. It's just for me, the narrative in this is just kind of like chaotic texture, which is definitely like a failing, I guess you could say, because there's so much effort and money put into it. But to me, and I think something I wanted to kind of add, and I think is like under discussed in games generally, is like we talk about mechanics, obviously, and we talk about narrative or maybe theme as a broader way to talk about that. But I think that there's, especially now in modern 3D video games, there is just this, like the VR, people talk a lot about presence, right? Just this feeling of being in a place and embodying a character, which for me is like the single strongest thing about this. And so shouldn't just be like glossed over, right? For me, the narrative I think is just is unhinged, right? Which is a cool. It's like schizo posting, but with like millions of dollars of my budget.
Okay, but it's just.
This
Go ahead, Billy.
the schizo factor, I feel like, came to a culmination for, I say us again, me and Everett, at the end of the game. When the game ends, it was just sort of like, okay, is this like that TV show Lost, where you're sort of grasping throughout the whole show. I haven't seen this show. This is how I understand it, which is why I didn't watch it. You're grasping the whole time to make sense of it, and every time you feel like you kind of understand what's going on, something changes. And you're like, oh fuck, wait a minute.
Yeah,
Now everything's different. Actually, now was I dreaming all the other stuff, or like what about that other thing? And the very final scene is this culmination where you're like, I think I understand what's going on, but I don't even know if the game ended. Like the closing scene, you're on this beach forever. Like you actually have to wait like 2 hours of just walking around in the mud until I think there's even like a title scene or something. And the same with like I think the last episode um of that show was like everybody's theories were invalidated. None of it was internally consistent. It was just like
yeah,
it proved the point that like it it was hopeless to even try to make sense of it all along. And I feel like you're
Yeah.
in that tension with the sort of schizoid stuff here, where you're like, is it even worth trying to make sense of this stuff, or is it pure noise? Or, oh my God, there's been enough logical actions here that now I finally see it all. I've got like my conspiracy theory on the wall, and I finally get what the fuck is going on, and then only to like have that shattered again later on. So it's like a trust exercise where you're constantly like manipulated into thinking you understand what's happening, and then being pleasantly or unpleasantly surprised that you don't.
So Billy,
I think that's like the best possible interpretation. I think we can. I'll let you go, Mitch, but I think we can connect that to David Lynch, right? David Lynch is a great kind of schizoauteur, right? And the which sometimes a deep reading actually reveals logical consistency in something like Mulholland Drive, but then sometimes you're like either you're like maybe it's there or maybe I'm not getting there. But like you talk about something like Twin Peaks, he basically says he's like, yeah, it kind of loosely ties together, but it's more like a feeling than it is like a coherent narrative.
and I just what you described, Billy, and Lost is always the example that I use for this as well. What you've described is my least favorite thing. Like it is nothing drives me crazier. Nothing drives me crazier than auteurs who are constantly building a mystery and actively trying to sell the excitement of that mystery to its audience, and then at the very end, just like, actually, there was no plan. Actually, there
It was
was
all a
no,
dream. It was
yeah.
all a dream.
And to the point that I really avoid projects, auteurs, shows, movies that start to dabble in that kind of aesthetic, like or language. Cause like I'll just start to sniff out this. It sounds like people who don't they don't have they don't have an exit strategy here. As soon as I sniff that there might not be an exit strategy, like I'm out. Like I just stopped watching the HBO show Watchmen after a few episodes. I was like, these people are building up a lot of mysteries, and I'm not sure that they're showing me any evidence they got this figured out. I'm out. I'm out. And I just walk away. Um, but with this, okay, so two different strategies, right? It is like, on one hand, what Matt's saying is he just tunes it out. Okay, this is just like schizo noise in the background. Um, and yet, for me, when I assess an artwork, like I try to assess every artwork based on the criteria that the artist establishes themselves, right? And Kojima, in terms of where he's obviously placed so much of his effort, so much of his budget, he clearly wants us to watch the cutscenes. He clearly really cares about this. He clearly really cares about this narrative. And so, like, I watch it. I watch all of them. I don't skip them. Um, and I have to take that into the
I mean,
assessment.
I
And
watch it too. I'm not saying I watch it. I'm not saying I'm skipping them
right, right,
because I do respect it. But what I'm not trying to do is put up the pinboard and craft a internally coherent worldview. I'm kind of letting it wash over me as more like emotional texture than a kind of clockwork universe, like, and I think
right.
that's, and look, the way that Koji, like, the president is dying and the president is your mom and you've got to carry the president's body so it doesn't explode, right? It really feels to me like dream logic
Yeah,
and like some kind of narrative surrealism more than, being like, I don't know, insert kind of like interlocking complex clockwork narrative structure, which I, of course, enjoy, right? But I think that he's signaling to us very clearly, hey, this is me, working out my weird, horny, delusional fantasies with all these actors and all this money, which is a wild ass thing to do and bold,
hmm
Uh,
right.
and like this is my shit and I'm doing it and I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Well, okay, hold on. I'm gonna switch over to I'm gonna switch over to a live view here, and let's get and
All right,
let's get to
let's
where we are.
go.
But I have a few more thoughts on this, right? And my thought is, let's ignore for a second. Oh shoot, are you guys still there? Yeah. Okay. Um, forgetting for a second the narrative element of this, right? Because on my second playthrough, I was with you. I was just like, okay, the president slash my mom's body is gonna explode, and the only thing that can tell me if bad guys are coming is this unborn fetus that I've strapped to my belly. I'm in. All right, sure, right on you. I'm in, you son of a bitch. But so the narrative logic I can go with as a thing that's, I mean, honestly, it's even pretty charming. In terms of the level of schizo of $100 million schizo post, right? But it's still worth thinking about the ways that this layer interacts with interacts with the other layers, because it is, we just went through the first hour of gameplay, and whereas the power of the game, as we established, is that it forces you into this really like durational experience, right? This really, really brutal experience. Where am I even going here? I don't know. I'm just gonna, oh right, I'm going here. You think that it's also just another layer of yeah, endurance performance art? That's a good, I, you know what? I never thought about that. I had never thought about it that way. Mhm. Right. Right. But I want to go back. Oh, okay, so let me just work out my reservations here in real time with you guys while you guys are here. Did they lose your audio? Oh no. Can you try talking again? Let me try. Okay, try again.
Art games, art
Okay,
games, art games, Mountain Dew.
okay. Is Matt back there,
Chat,
kid?
can you hear me? Chat, can you hear
I think it
me?
should be.
Still not working, says Dustin.
Now it works. Now it works. Apologies.
Now it
Every
works.
time
Okay,
yeah,
thanks.
I switch in input sources.
I'm
Okay.
back. Yeah.
Thanks, team. Thanks, team. Okay. So apologize for missing that point. But
Just trying to mute my points. You're trying to censor
I
me, Mitch. Come on.
exactly. I fight
I'm
dirty.
just dunking on you here, and you're
Yeah.
just turning
No.
off my volume.
Nobody heard you. No. Nobody heard you perfectly refute my logic and critique. Uh,
Yeah.
Nobody witnessed that
What
perfect
a
storm.
coincidence.
Um, but no, help me work through this then in real time when you guys are here, because I do want to come back to like I hear your point about the whole narrative thing also being an exercise in testing the viewer's stamina, right? In like
Yeah.
durational performance art and whatever. Ooh, a rope. I don't need that rope right now for any reason. But I think it's really generous because once again, I try to assess an artwork by the criteria that is suggested by the artist. And I just see so much evidence that Kojima really, really, really also wants us to see him and admire him as a filmmaker. I see the evidence in this all over the place, from his fixation with using Hollywood stars, all right,
Yeah.
to how long and like sort of traditionally cinematic he wants these cutscenes to be. Um, like it, he just seems like he really, really cares about being a filmmaker a lot. And if that's his goal,
I agree.
like I
I
think he
agree.
also fails at that. Like I think this is a really bad movie for a lot of reasons.
I still can't help but interpret it first and foremost as a conceptual artwork. Like, think
Mhm,
about the pitch. Before I ever played the game, I was excited about it because somebody said they described like the most dystopian post-capitalist scenario, which is you're an Amazon delivery guy and you just have to run around the world delivering packages. And it
mhm.
takes hours for you to run between points. Like, what an obscene, absurd premise that sort of like simultaneously expresses, a post-capitalist society while also forcing you to do it. Like, you actually have to hold, like, you are this weird little person inside of these numbers. You're the game player. You're part of a like industrial complex by even like plugging in and buying it. And then you're emulating somebody who's in an even more absurd, extreme version of it. Like that as a premise, stop there is like hilarious, a beautiful gesture, super rich and like convoluted and like sort of self-reflexive. And then it has its second layer, which is you actually play it and you realize it's a lot more than just like a one-liner. It's
Yeah.
way more schizo-auteur, like it has depth. I mean, and maybe you're the thing that upsets you, I think, Mitch, it sounds like, is that you have like an expectation of consistency or of logic or of like
Yes.
care for you as somebody who's like been handed a coherent thing. And if you remove that, it's very freeing, I can watch David Lynch because I don't expect it to make sense. And
Yeah.
then, similar to you like having the opposite effect, like, oh, I don't think Watchmen's going to be able to pull off this narrative. I have the opposite effect, which is like, I can't believe that there's like this much consistent internal logic. Like, this is almost like a real story that I'm actually involved in and like think that there's going to be an outcome.
Yeah.
Like you've tricked me into caring compared to like you fooled me into expecting it to actually have a result or like to carry through. So I feel like it
Right.
succeeded on both of those levels.
Yeah. I'm a
It's
hundred
like
percent with you,
I'm
Billy.
just too
That's very
results
much my like
oriented. I'm not
approach.
enjoying the
Yeah. Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. No,
I
I think you're demanding too much kind of like linearity. Like just let it wash over you. Like it's fucking insane. That's
it's
great. You know.
it's like I'm losing a Death Stranding on the most profound level.
Oh shit.
Which is why I didn't need to play the game
Owned.
either.
You're
You know what I
owned,
mean?
Mitch.
Um,
I won it without playing.
you did. You are the that is the truly the
Billy
best
wins
way to
the
win a
show.
Death
Billy
Stranding.
wins this episode. Billy is the winner.
So I just found some lost cargo here that was dropped, maybe by an NPC, but maybe by like a fellow player who is online. And now I'm going to do a good Samaritan duty, and I'm going to drop it in this post box so that some people can be happy. Um, another thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit. Um, you were talking about playing this game with Everett, watching him play at like a very particular time, and like it is really worth talking about. Uh, it's really worth talking about the world that this game was delivered into, and
I mean,
how the
that's what I wanted to bring up when Billy was talking. Just this, the fact that this came out pre-COVID and then like hit during COVID is like a fucking bullseye. Crazy.
it's absolutely amazing, and it is. Sometimes great artworks just get that serendipity where they hit at the perfect moment, and that moment just amplifies. Like it is just the artwork can just resonate through that moment, which is like sometimes it's just good fortune. But holy heck, man, I cannot think of too many other artworks that hit at exactly the right moment. And I mean, just to get a little bit like VH1 storytellers on this. I remember when this game came out, and it was obviously like, it was the biggest release on the game calendar. I got it. And look, this is a game about, as we've established before, I'm about to make it to this wind farm, and hopefully I'll see. I'm going to finally get to this secluded terminal on the map, right? Here on the map, are all of these different bunkers where people are secluded, and even when you just have to deliver packages to them because nobody can leave the house because there's this goddamn plague outside that will kill people if they go outside, except for our character Sam Porter Bridges, because he has some kind of immunity or whatever. Oh, look, here's a rope. Somebody left this rope for me, I think, and that's going to be really helpful. And it's like the and so there's this constant motif in the extremely heavy-handed narrative exposition about the importance of connecting people, and the only thing that can connect people is this 3D internet that we're all building together. um, Oh darn, I guess I can't use this rope. And anyway, it's like, and then the pandemic comes, and like we were all like living this in real life, like completely isolated, maybe waiting for our Amazon delivery packages or stuff like that, talking on the internet. And for me, here was the other thing too, and this was another reason why I couldn't finish the game on my first playthrough. Like it was way, way, way too real. Like I was being isolated in the real world, and then just playing this video game where I was isolated in like a prettier version of the real world. But also, you have this you have this fetus attached to you that makes this baby crying sound, and it doesn't even come out of your TV speakers, folks. It comes out of your controller. When there are bad guys nearby, you get this baby wailing through your controller. I don't know how to get up this hill. I got to figure it out later. Um, and when this came out, I just like, I had like a 7-month old baby or whatever. And so every night when I'm like stopping to catch breath, every night when I'm like, trying to have my downtime to just play my video games, I've got like either a real life baby like crying upstairs, or a video game baby crying through my controller, and I'm so tired that I cannot keep track of which is which. I'm just being cried at while I'm alone, like every day and every night. Oh no!
What just happened?
I wiped out
This
really
fell.
big. Yeah, and now
Mitch,
my
the chat was saying that they still can't hear me, I guess.
they still can't hear you.
Yeah, I
Can you
don't
hear
know.
me? Let me
Yeah,
look in the
that they
chat.
said that they could hear you, but not me, which is strange, really strange. You're really trying to censor me.
No, you guys are on the same feed.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's what I
Mackenzie
thought.
says we can
Okay,
hear
okay.
both of you. Okay, Lorna
Matt
says she can
L
hear
is
it
just
all.
different.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Anyway, whatever. Like that's my little story. But man, did this ever hit like for the world that we were. And like boy oh boy, was it really a time to just be concentrating on you know, on putting one foot in front of the other. The isolation
Yeah,
stuff and the baby stuff really hit me pretty hard.
yeah, no, I mean, I really, and going into our like, is it art, is it not art type of discussion, like, how does that factor into that, the kind of, call it, cultural or aesthetic resonance with reality? Um, how does that factor into your evaluation? Like, does that make it more art because it kind of hits in this powerful way at this time? Or is that just kind of like a coincidence? Is Kojima a prophet?
Um, okay, so I know the obvious thing is for me to be grumpy and say, like, no, absolutely not. But I'd actually lean a little bit more to yes, to be totally honest, right? Like, there was, like this, and he has been, for all that I can criticize how he blows out this maximalist narrative that is just, I mean, and there's infinite examples of terrible editing and terrible, terrible filmmaking, right? And terrible
Yeah,
acting, right? He's chosen all of this based on a core concept that he's really precisely and brilliantly identified, which is, the ways that we are isolated, the ways that we depend on these network technologies to connect us, the ways that we're really dependent on it, the ways that we are near climate disaster that is going to like exacerbate this, the ways that we live in a like economy. Like he did I never want to go too deep into the profit, visionary narrative for any artist, be it Kojima or Marcel Duchamp or anyone, but I mean, I'll be damned if this wasn't an absolutely brilliant reading of the temperature that we were in society, and a very, very deliberate gesture to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean,
You
as a go ahead, Billy.
I was just gonna say, you could also say like the experience that we had with COVID was specifically because capitalism optimizes for like fragile systems because they're like they have the
Hmm.
highest profit margin. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
we'd been in like a long enough period of stability within that like we had an extremely fragile but yeah, easy to break sort of
This
system. And
hollowing out of redundancy, removal of redundancy and
exactly.
yeah.
safety. Yeah,
And so in some ways, like the writing was on the wall, and I think you can sort of like pull that out, and it's why he probably wanted to make a game which is post-apocalyptic. Even before COVID, there was already an increasing trend on post-apocalyptic, TV shows, et cetera.
Hmm.
This was like in the water and gaining, and so yes, it's a coincidence of unfathomable depth, but it also sort of makes sense why you can simultaneously imagine this as a horror story and then have that horror story unfold in real time.
Absolutely.
yeah,
It's like nobody
absolutely.
knew that it was going to be COVID, but as you correctly pointed out, everybody knew that we were that it would only take a something to push us into this precarious position.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, just on a pure aesthetic level, like, I love uh, the whole apocalyptic genre across all kinds of media and particularly in science fiction. But this I felt was the very rare, um, fresh aestheticization of apocalypse. You know, this kind of
Hmm.
Icelandic landscape, this strange supernatural oil, all of whales covered in oil and all this stuff, which
Yeah,
obviously has this kind of environmental climate themes, but it wasn't the dumb, obvious environmental horror takes. You know, like I felt like he brought all these themes together in this very beautifully aestheticized way that still hit as apocalyptic, but was also just felt really fresh and gorgeous.
do the whales do anything later on in the game? I never got to the whales in my first playthrough.
What do the whales do? You fight the whale, right?
You fight a whale?
Yeah.
Well, I
Or the
can't
whale
support that.
kills you. I mean, there's a whale. There's a whale. Actually, the place that I got stuck in my first playthrough and kind of bounced off the game for a while was I got kind of killed by the whale. And then I lost some packages that I need to complete the story. And then I think I was like supposed to walk all the way back to the beginning, and it was like too punishing, and I just
Yeah.
gave up. Uh, and then I did get past that, and now I'm like further, but I actually still haven't finished the game, which is my basic behavior with almost all games. I kind of play until I feel like I've had a sufficient taste, and
Got
then
to get
I
to the last
stop.
level.
I
It's
Yeah.
need
so
to. Yeah,
crazy.
no, no, no. This is one. That's actually why I started again, and I still have it downloaded on my PS5 now. I bought the PS5 version, and I still have it downloaded on there because I do. One day I will finish this game.
And
I mean,
so,
the whales, I mean, the title Stranding, what I mean? Like the whole thing is being stranded on this beach of a reality that's like sort of in between these two worlds, and you can't tell like are you from the ocean and you're stranded on the beach, or are you the beach and now like the ocean has risen and now it's covering you and killing you. And it's like whales are so important for that metaphor of all this sort of like stuck in the sand and just like
yeah.
confused which direction is the right way.
All right. So, super exciting time for the. Oh, there's a whale. There's a whale.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. What, now you're getting attacked, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so.
Exciting time for the stream. I'm in a bad guy zone, so we get to see another part of another
And we
mechanic
can
in the
actually hear
game.
the baby crying
Yeah,
on your
and you
mic.
can all hear the baby crying out of my controller. This is
Wow.
like really
Wow.
triggering. I'm falling down. Look, I'm gonna destroy my package. Um, I was surprised. I really thought this would be a mellow game to play, like on stream, because I could like chat with you guys while just pressing forward. But you do, don't underestimate how challenge. Oh, I got to eat a crypto buyout. Don't underestimate how challenging it is to sometimes press L and R, like while pressing forward. Um,
No, I mean, this feeling of getting attacked like this is such a helpless, threatened feeling. I feel like he really captured that well. Like and that is a very, in the kind of video game, the strong feelings of disempowerment are a
yeah.
very clear commentary on the kind of video game power fantasy normal experience.
We
And
talked
now
all about the multiplayer aspect yet.
no,
No, we
let's jump
should.
into that. I think that's an important thing to jump into right now.
That was, I think, what I mentioned to you all the last time we mentioned this game at all was like the thing that one of the things that blew my mind around many of the things that blow your mind and many of the things where I was like, is this real? Like, am I interpreting what am I seeing correctly, or am I just like mistaking something? No, no, this is real. This is what they actually did. This is actually happening. Oh my God. Was it had to do with the multiplayer aspect. And so you're going around and there's this weird like permeable edge to your gameplay and everybody else's gameplay around, I think, these sort of like crossroads and maybe even beyond that, where you can kind of like leave stamps. And I guess one of the references is meant to be kind of like when you are a homeless person and you're trying to find a safe place, there's this like homeless pictographic icon system that's been going back centuries that, you're supposed to like paint or carve in to say like, oh, these people are trustworthy, or you can get food in that direction or something like that. Sort of like
Mm-hmm.
wayfaring notices to help others on their travels better navigate. And in this world, it looks like what it's like neon stickers of smiley faces. I want to say there was something about peeing, maybe almost like marking, with
Yeah.
like pee or like neon
You
colored
can pee in the
liquid or
game, yeah.
something.
There's
And
a peeing mechanic in the game.
Um,
and this is like such an interesting mechanic. I mean, I won't go into the next part, which is what really blew my mind, but I want to
no,
hear
I'm
y'all's
gonna try
thoughts
to
on
do it
that
right now.
general mechanic.
Keep talking. I forget the button to I forget the button
Well,
to
I
do
can,
that.
yeah, I
But
can talk. I
I
mean,
want to do that because it's so important, and I want you guys to keep talking about it.
yeah, so I mean, I think that the like way we can describe it, or the language that I like to describe this in the kind of video game terms is like we have like massively multiplayer games like World of Warcraft or whatever, and Death Stranding is kind of like a massively single player game, right? You're in the world alone, you're always alone, but the world is shared with other people and other so things like other people can build bridges or leave ropes or ladders or other structures which help you. And then you can, as you walk over them, you can give them likes. You can push the like button and transfer likes to their structures, which then everybody can see that this bridge over a ravine has 1,000 likes and was placed by this person. You see their name, this player, and those structures can be very meaningful in terms of gameplay. Like if there's a ravine, you might have to walk for like an hour to get around it. Whereas if somebody has placed a bridge over it, that can make like a huge difference in your single player experience. So I thought that was a very and there's something there that it's definitely in tension with this very strong feeling of aloneness and isolation, right? This kind of like through the network, we are helping each other, kind of rewarding each other, even though it's these likes that are kind of meaningless, have no actual, they're not like money that you can spend in the game or, I guess it's a score, but that's kind of it, right? And I thought that that was so. There's some kind of grace in that, right? That it's not the likes are not instrumentalized, even if they are quantified, which I thought was a very surprising and interesting, very non-video gaming kind of decision to make.
And I just did that, right? I set up this ladder, and I'm going to right, and now that is going to appear not just for me, but also for anybody else in the game. So anybody else in the game, ordinarily that area would be unscalable, and now it's climbable, and that'll be there for other people in the game. Also, I just peed, and that now people can like where I peed. Um, and as we said before, we're not really sure. This was, by the way, a big hit in my household. I played this to advance the game a little bit with my 5-year-old daughter last night, and she was just really. It's actually the first thing that she asked about any video game. She says, "Well, can you pee in this video game?" And I was like, "This time, actually, yes." And she was really exciting.
Yes, you
She was really
can.
excited, and we played until we unlocked the urination mechanism in this game. So that was great. But sorry, that was a little bit of yeah, that was a little bit of a getting sidetracked. Yeah, this multiplayer thing. This is where, like, for me, you gotta hand it to him, man. Like, we talked about how brilliant it is to have this completely non-commercial, really grueling, unforgiving first player um, mechanic of walking and occasionally pressing L and R. And the addition of that second layer where, like, okay, the narrative layer is about connection and walking and traversal. All right, the gameplay layer is about just walking, is just about doing fetch quests for different like for different npcs in the game. But the online component, like, also is about building infrastructure together to facilitate that. Man, like, that's a pretty beautiful synergy between the different layers of the game.
It makes me think of the EVE Online thing where the more hostile the environment is or the more grueling it is, the higher people enjoy helping each other. You know, like the fact that you build up this empathy through both going through such hell, the idea that you can help somebody avoid some smidgen of that hell is like extremely rewarding. And to be able to add it into the game is it's like I totally agree, great mechanism. The second part of it that I love is that it's not clear how it works. Like I'm amazed that you know even that much about it, Matt, because you must have looked it up online. Playing the game, there's very little like instruction about what's happening or why it's happening. I remember lots of speculation between me and Everett trying to figure out like, well, it must not be every single bridge that every single person has made because they'd be everywhere. It'd be like littering. So there must be some weird logic about which ones you see and which ones other people see
Right.
and how often, like, is there fully universal or are there pockets? And that led us to this bizarre moment where he was getting killed. He was not doing a good job surviving. He was like dead, and we're like floating. And then there's like angel bodies who start coming down and like helping defend him by like shooting the
Mm-hmm.
enemy or doing something. And we were like, oh my God, this is an extension of the multiplayer. This is one of the other players seeing us like map over to their universe all of a sudden and like giving us a hand. We thought it was like a real human being in real time participating in our gameplay. And because, we don't know where the lines are, they don't make it clear. We were able to sort of, in that moment at least, believe that was real, which was an extremely exhilarating feeling. And they didn't even have to program that to be able to give you that feeling just by keeping ambiguity as like a core game logic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really beautiful point, and I think that's a really, when you're thinking about game design, there's so much like that, yeah, exactly as you say, by keeping things a little bit ambiguous and mysterious, that people will project and imagine all of this, like if you're thinking about like enemy AI or like agents in the game, right? People will project all this like theory of mind onto them, and really they're just running some little behavior tree of like run to this point and then this point and then back, right? But people are like, no, 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 he's running away from me, or he's scared, or he's thinking about lunch. You know what I mean? And that's really beautiful. That's, I think, a really core part of the experience of playing games, and I think that's one of the things that um, we have more as kids when we don't understand, or especially as like naive players, right? We don't understand what's possible. And I think Kojima, yeah, is kind of activating that really well by creating this confusing and amorphous system of like, yeah, where the kind of reality is leaking, the realities of other players are leaking into your world, um, and yeah, I think I love that dimension of the game.
And so we're at a really fortunate part in the game right now because we get to see all this happen. Where I've just finished the quest that, according to the in-game narrative logic, right? I've connected this remote wind farm to the special internet that allows information and resources to flow between these previously isolated cities. And then of course on the meta level, right? And we see right here on the map that I've also enabled in like a real life, like my household internet connection to come into the map. And I immediately get to see all of these ladders and bridges and steps that other players have dropped in this world that are going to make it so that getting back from this spot where you saw me fall and struggle and have to get around bad guys, getting back is going to be a lot easier because all these other players on the real life internet left this stuff for me. And then that's pretty smart, man. That's really good.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, and I think that also that experience, right, of making connection and then seeing the world change, right? It's just very clear. That's very rewarding, right? That, as you say, you struggle out to the place, then you connect it to the chiral network, as it's called, uh, and then the world is transformed, right? It's no longer as hostile. You have kind of friends in the world, even though they're not actually present moving around in the world, but they're there helping you. And it starts to feel more like kind of this, like, yeah, here we have these icons, which are like, could be, this also reminds me a lot, right? I think it's important to connect this to, like, yeah, that could be warning you that there's ghosts ahead. This is important to connect this to Dark Souls and Elden Ring, right? This is a very clear mechanical reference to the signposting system in Dark Souls, which I think is the first place that it appeared, at least in my knowledge.
I'm trying to make a sign, but I can't remember the button, which is so lame. And I don't want to look it up. But yeah, now yeah, there we go. We see everybody else's signs, and so yeah, now it's just like the world. Look at that bridge. That's so great. So the world is a lot less hostile because we connected it to the internet. But it is great.
Yeah, totally. No, I think that's, and obviously this theme of reconnecting and connecting these isolated settlements together. I do think, I mean, there's this interesting, very, very COVID-like fact that you never, or outside of the cutscenes, basically like in the in-game world, it's extremely rare to see other moving characters, right? You only see them as these like hologram projections in these bunker um, bunker situations. You come to the bunker door and then they talk to them as a hologram, which is crazily COVID like.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, like everyone is a Zoom call.
yeah,
Perfect.
even when
Now,
you're like standing at their doorstep, you're like talking to them on Zoom. Um, and it's about bandwidth, right? That's what you're doing when you're
yeah.
connecting each place to the chiral network, is you're increasing the bandwidth, and now all of a sudden the bandwidth expands.
And so thank you to Rickard Biernier '07, all right, who created this bridge, which is making it a lot easier to play this game now. And 16,000 people have used this bridge. And now we are connecting the fictional United Cities of America and the Death Stranding universe, but so too is he connected my game and my life and the lives of all you art and video games watchers, all right, to the broader world. Two levels at least we're working on. The other nice Oh yeah, I forgot the other nice thing too is that while this exists, it does require constant maintenance. Like I have to drop a couple chiral crystals in here so that this thing will persist in the shared game world, right? Oh guys, wow. um Matt and Billy, I know we were talking about maybe going for 90 minutes here in this stream, and I feel like we've actually done a really good job covering
I'm happy. Yeah, I
the
feel like you
arc,
just
as it were.
landed the plane. You just landed the plane for us right there, Mitch. So I'm happy to cut it there. That was another epic Mitch just summarizing, closing.
Can I
Mood.
just wait? Can I just I want to hear, everybody's sort of final conclusions and thoughts. But I just want to say at the conclusion of this, because we started this out, you and I, Matt, have had some really good banter back and forth about this over the past few weeks. And some of my interpretation of this game is based on the like uniquely scarring like context in which I first encountered it. Um, some of it is, I think for me, I have a little bit of an unfair recoil against like some of the pomp that this game comes packaged in. But I was
Yeah.
so glad to revisit it. And this is my final conclusion because we've sort of been joking about like coming up with a final verdict. And I'd love to hear what your guys is. Mine has changed since I picked this up this week. And I just think that this is like it's a very mediocre one player game. It's a terrible movie. It's an awful narrative experience. And yeah, it really is like one of the best artworks I could possibly imagine in this medium. Like it is an absolute triumph of an art game. It's incredible.
Yeah. Oh my God. We win. We win. Mitch capitulates. I love it. I love it. I've never felt such triumph before.
That's a great
No,
narrative art.
I'm with you, Mitch. I think that the the total impression is for me so powerful, that, as you say, like as if we deconstruct it into all its parts, it's extremely flawed on many levels, right? But the kind of gestalt, is, for me, really really powerful, memorable, and kind of emotional, So, and I think and importantly, in line with your kind of thesis about games kind of expressing their ideas through their mechanics, I think it really, really does that. Even if I have some quibbles with that as a kind of overriding theory of games as art, I think, by that criteria, it's excellent.
I think as an artwork, it's great, full stop. I think as a movie and as a game, the very large caveat, it's great. And that caveat is that I don't actually have to watch it and I don't actually have to play it. With those caveats, I still think it's a great movie and a great game.
That's awesome. Well, I think that is a wicked way to land the plane. Um,
Good
Cool.
show. Good one. This was a good one. Well done,
Thanks,
Mitch.
you all. Yeah,
super
Yeah,
very
fun.
fun.
terrific.
All right, looking forward to seeing you guys all again next week.
And thanks everybody in the chat. Really nice to see you all.
Yeah,
All right.
great
Take it
chat
easy.
today. Great chat. Thanks, everyone. All right, we'll see you next
All
week.
right.
Thanks.
See you next time. Bye.